vlog is all about correcting and teaching pronunciation. So before we begin, I'm just going to have an overview of the importance of correcting. It is so important that Briddies do not learn errors, but also correcting goes hand in hand with motivation. So it's about getting the right balance of correcting them in the right way, using different methods, so that it doesn't impact on their motivation, but instead empowers them to want to learn the correct way to pronounce words. It's also really important to think about your approach, as what works for one Briddie might not work for another. So the more strategies you have, the easier it will be when you encounter this in your lessons. So stay tuned to hear some ideas, or if you have any additional ideas, please feel free to share them and comment below and share them with the team. It's all about sharing and helping each other develop our practice. It's also important to remember that you do not have to correct every single error. Make a note of the error when you see or hear it when it happens throughout the lesson, and perhaps make a note of this in the review so that the next teacher knows to recap this if they see it and they can help. So I'm going to start with a general overview about correcting and correction of pronunciation. Remember to give your Briddies the opportunity to speak, to express themselves, and try not to correct them whilst they are speaking. Come back to errors, especially if they're reading a chunk of text. What I normally do is I normally just select a few lines if it's a big piece of text. And then as they read, if an error happens, I underline it or make a note of it. And then afterwards we can discuss things further. Then they will know when to stop reading, rather than you having to keep stop and interrupting them. You also need to think about how you deliver your lesson. So your pace will also affect if you'll be able to correct the student. Make sure you're not moving too quickly from one aspect to another. Gestures are also really helpful for Briddies to understand that they've made an error, so they can see visually that a mistake has been made, whether it be by an action you show, or using your face. Flashcards can be helpful for both older and younger Briddies. They help to reinforce the understanding of the Briddie by giving them a clue, but still giving them some control over their learning. This way you're guiding them to help correct themselves. Self-correction has been proved as one of the most effective ways to correct students, especially ESL students. It can also make lessons really fun. You can always turn it into a bit of a game. And then, afterwards, it's all about celebrating the successes. For example, if a Briddie has trouble with articles, you could write them on a flashcard, which you could make with a piece of paper and a lollipop stick. And then you could flash this up to remind them that they've missed it out. It turns it into a bit more fun, and they don't feel like they're necessarily getting it wrong. You need to ensure that you are being positive, so remember to point out when the Briddie has done something really well too. It's about fostering an understanding in our Briddies that mistakes are an important part of learning, and that actually we need to make mistakes to learn sometimes. Then when you have a regular student, you can comment on the progress that your student makes and make the student feel like you're really paying attention to their needs. Talk about the progress they've made and how you're glad to see that they're remembering the article A in their sentences. Also remember that some Briddies might keep making a mistake or the same error, and it's important to give them a break or change the activity. Then in your review, make a note that it needs to be returned to, but don't make them develop a negative attitude to what they're learning. So basically, just keep returning to things bit by bit, little and often, and hopefully eventually it'll click. Approach it in different ways too. They might not see it in a written form, so use props if they can't see it in the prop form. See if you can use movement to help them understand. So for example, if they keep forgetting the article A, you can model the sentence, but when you say A, you stand up or you clap your hands, and the Briddie has to repeat. This is going to be about correcting and pronunciation with younger Briddies, but some of what I might say here is also applicable to older Briddies too. Your tone of voice is really important. Try to use a really gentle tone when correcting, and encourage them to use full sentences, and possibly, if they're capable, self-correction too. Using a harsh tone of voice can result in students who are both afraid to make mistakes, and then who become apprehensive to talk in lessons. We've all been there where it's been quite challenging if you've got a basic level Brady or a lower level Brady, and actually helping them with their corrections and pronunciation can be difficult. And it can be easy to just fall back on constantly saying the correct word and getting them to repeat. And though there are times where yes, this will work and it is helpful, it's about finding alternatives too. It's about building a bank of options that you can take and use. The methods you will use will vary depending on the age or the ability or even the preferred learning styles of the Brady. So for instance, with a younger Brady, they might benefit from the use of phonics, sounding out a word, looking at the different sounds, segmenting and blending it. And you could even be using different voices. I'll often use the robot arms, which I find really helpful. Also, something like movement. So when sounding out a word, I will use the phonics robot arms, which some of you might have heard. So for example, if I have the word cat, we'll start with saying the single sounds, k, ah, t. Then we'll use our robot arms, k, ah, t. Then I'll get them to repeat it again, but I'll model blending it together. So for the last time, k, ah, t, cat, and then they repeat. Similarly, in sentences, modelling them on your hand can help. And also, if you've got objects, showing them and showing the parts of the sentence that they make up. So for example, if their sentence is a cat, I would model it a cat. Then if I had an actual cat, I could say a cat. Praise is also really important. Praise them when they get it right. They will recognise praise and this will help them to feel a sense of achievement too. Just like I mentioned already, it's not about correcting all of their mistakes, every single one, as it's likely in some cases, especially for lower levels or younger Bradies, there might be a lot of them. Okay, so for this section, I'll be talking a bit about older Bradies. Some of it you might have heard a little bit in the younger Brady section I did, but this is also applicable for older and perhaps even adults, so this is just tailoring it a little bit more. As I mentioned before, tone is just as important with older and adult Bradies. You need to be encouraging them, and this will also encourage them to use full sentences. Just like with the younger Bradies, if you're using a harsh tone of voice, this could make the students become afraid of mistakes and apprehensive to talk in lessons. We spoke before about the cultural differences there, and actually making mistakes is almost frowned upon. So if you've got an older Brady or perhaps an adult, they might be even more conscious of making mistakes, so bear that in mind. Again, using gestures can also be helpful. So it could be that you're using your hand for an action, like I said, or your face. Or for an older or an adult Brady, you might repeat the word or sentence, but use gestures or your tone of voice for them to see where the error is. This way they can see which word or which part they got wrong and think what needs to be different. Like I said above, some strategies will work for some Bradies and for others they won't. So you'll need to know what works for your Brady, which may mean some trial and error. And it's about adapting to support them and their needs, which is also why the feedback and the comments in our reviews that we leave are so important, not only for the Brady to know what they need to practice, but for the next teacher or for you when you next teach them as a reminder of what they need to work on. Often with older or adult Bradies, they find it difficult to think of the word they want to use in English or perhaps to explain themselves. This is where I find the chat bar is so useful and they can use that to type exactly what they want. Then you're able to clearly help correct them and tell them exactly how they should be saying it. Equally, if they're making an error that they kind of don't understand, again, you could use the chat bar. Type it in where they can translate it, and then you can discuss the error and help them move forward. Writing the corrections on the boards can be really useful too. So explaining it is good, but also seeing it in different ways, so visually on the screen, can be helpful for particular learners. So if I have an older Brady that perhaps makes an error in a sentence, I still find that counting the number of words on my hand is helpful and not too babyish. Or sometimes, and I mean I'm quite a fast typer, I will type it on the screen, which I think is really useful for a lot of Bradies. Just as I mentioned with the younger buddies, still praise them. Everybody likes to hear they're doing a good job, no matter how old you are. It's just finding the right way and adapting the praise. So correcting isn't just about pronunciation, it's also about grammar, and sometimes that can be forgotten a little bit when you're listening so hard to the words. And it's often when these grammatical errors are missed that they become a learned error. The quicker you can correct your buddy and they learn the correct form, the easier it will be for them and for you. It's harder for them to unlearn something. There are loads of common grammatical errors that you probably have come across already or that you will come across in the lesson, whether it be from the use of prepositions, suffixes, pronouns, articles, there's many. But when these errors happen, address them. So I often find that this is a really good opportunity to get the whiteboard out, use props, or to discuss the error. If you do this, you'll be meeting those teacher standards again, and you'll be helping to ensure that the buddy makes progress. What's also important is to remember, if you're correcting them, give them an opportunity to practice the mistake and use it in a different context. So for example, if they said, "There are duck," then we could practice, okay, let's go to the whiteboard, let's draw the 3 ducks that there actually are, and let's write the sentence, "There are 3 ducks." Then you could go again, next page on the whiteboard, or perhaps use your flashcards, 3 cats. How many cats? You could type the beginning of the sentence, "There are 3 cats." It's about using the similar structure but adapting it in different ways so they can see the context and understand it and use it and apply it in these different ways. So here's just a brief overview of some of the methods I've mentioned in today's vlog. So it's about identifying the error and getting them to identify it themselves using voice or gestures or flashcards. You could work on pronunciation errors by using different voices. You could use props or the classroom whiteboard to explore an error further. Phonics could be used to help explore pronunciation of words. If it's a particular word they're struggling with, you could practice using that word in a sentence and then making your own sentences with that word. Also remember that gestures and actions are still really important in helping them to see the correction and also to indicate errors. Encourage self-correction, whether that be through your tone, actions, or the use of flashcards. Use modelling. Use your voice, use the whiteboard, and use the chat box. As always, I really hope this has helped. Thanks guys. Bye.